Hi, thanks for dropping by again. So what I wanted to do in this video is share some insights with you looking at Mr. Hogan's swing and look specifically at his hip turn in the transition, because I think it can be a little confusing when you read or hear a lot of information about how you should start that downswing. So we're going to take a look at what he did, and then I'll show you a very quick demonstration of how he did it, okay? Alright, here we see Mr. Hogan's swing from 1953. We've already taken him to the top. What I want to show you is a couple of things. So it would certainly appear that at the top of his swing his right hip is higher than his left. I think we would all agree on that. If he were to have just turned his hips in the traditional sense, we would see a very different picture. Now, it can get a little confusing because in 5 lessons he wrote about and showed a demonstration picture of something like an elastic band tied to his left hip, and he was just going to simply snap his left hip back into place. That's a little confusing if you just go by the picture, or if someone somewhere has just told you, hey, just turn your hips. It's a little bit more complicated than that, unfortunately. So back to the top. Right hip is higher than the left. What I want to show you is at P5, that's when the left arm is about parallel to the ground on the downswing, which is right here. His hips and his knees appear to be in the original configuration that they were at address, and so now his hips seem to be about level with each other, if that makes sense. So I'm going to show you here in a second how just turning your hips is not possible to make this picture. And this is a picture that you will see a lot of great players in at that P5 position. And just as a side note, when you see a player in this position, this immaculate position where the left arm is parallel to the ground, both knees and the hips are back to square, that tells us that that swing, specifically the downswing, is a very pivot oriented downswing, that there's no arm pulling. Because if you were to just pull your arms down towards the ball, your hips would still be in an open position and there'd be no way to match that position. In other words, your arms would drastically outrace your body, even at this short duration of time between the top P4 to P5. Okay, so now both hips are back to level, and then we'll see the right hip will start to be lower than the left. So that's what he was doing, was perhaps not exactly how it was described in the book. So here I am wound up in a pivot position with no club. If I were to just feel or try to just turn my hips, you'd see my right hip would stay very high. It would take my right shoulder out immediately across the target line. So now what I'm going to do is have the sensation that since my left hip is lower than my right, that my left hip must start to elevate, which is going to level my hips. So you can see left hip is starting to elevate, right hip is starting to go back down, and that would be Mr. Hogan's P5 left arm parallel to the ground position. So hopefully you can see there's kind of a big difference in turning the hips and leveling the hips. Unfortunately, I think the terminology over the years is what's caused the confusion, because when you look at me doing this, are my hips turning? Well, of course they're turning, but they're turning as the result of the re-leveling effect that I'm creating in my hips. It's not an out and around turn. It's right hip's high, now right hip has to go level, which means left hip has to continually elevate, and the right hip goes low. So that's something I wanted to share with you. Hopefully you found that interesting, and look forward to seeing your comments, and thanks for watching.